I'm so grateful that we get to have another conversation. And Amy, thank you so much for joining TJ and I today. This is a real pleasure for us.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Of course. So before we get started, Amy, I thought it would be good if you could introduce yourself to our audience and let them know who you are and what you're up to.
Well, my name is Amy Van Ling. I'm a spiritual advisor for Brentwood Inspired Living Center. And I do a lot of things. I'm a mom, and I'm excited about life, and I love working with people. And I'm here to chat about how we can live our highest and best lives.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much. So I thought first we would check in and just kind of see how you both are doing today with everything going on. TJ, if you want to start with anything you're experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I would love that. I've noticed a lot of shifting happening for me internally. And I think in our last show on Tuesday, Jeremy, with Adriana, we talked about how people have, I think, settled into, at least for now, kind of what the new normal is. And for me, I started asking some of the questions, which is, where do I truly want to put my focus? And I noticed that the collective energy right now, a lot of it is frenetic and also very restricted, very, very closed in fear. And so I woke up today with a deeper recognition that it's a conscious choice for us to remain open, to trust, and to be a voice for the expansion that's possible. I wanted to start with just a very, very brief quote from Dr. Wayne Dyer, and I'm just going to give a sentence of it, and it's a paraphrase. But he said, every spiritual advance I've ever made was preceded by some sort of fall. And he goes on to talk about a divorce, an illness, an addiction, and I think for him, a lot of that had happened in his life. And so I think this is very, very rich and fertile soil right now for us to create our lives in the way that we truly want to, not just individually, but collectively. And that each of us has a role in how we have a profound effect in consciousness, right? Because collective consciousness right now is kind of all over the place. And so we get to plug into that or not, or plug in more deeply to our essential beingness and then be not just the voice for that, but the frequency of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. How about you, Amy?
I was going to say that's it. That's a wrap.
Okay, bye everyone.
No, absolutely. I'm right there with you. It's funny, as I was thinking the other day about the Renaissance period. So when you were talking, I just was reminded of that again, and all those, long held beliefs and thoughts, just because of curiosity and allowing the shifts, this whole new worldview came about, and that moved into the age of enlightenment. And so, yeah, just taking the moment that we're in and embracing it, right? Just arms wide open and opening up to that unknown. We talk about that a lot, embracing the unknown. Well, guess what? We get to do that right now. So it's exciting. I find this to be a really exciting period for us. And you're right, there is a lot of fear and that restriction going on. And something I always like to remember about fear, because I kind of like to know how this human body of mine works too, is that when we go into our place of fear, our amygdala is activated, right? And so when our amygdala gets activated in our brain, and that's a part of our brain for survival and our emotions, then that means other parts of our brain become a little impaired. And so our prefrontal cortex is kind of like sleeping a little bit. And that's where we have our reasoning, our judgments, our decision making, our executive functions, right? So for me, it just gives me clarity, like, okay, so if I'm in fear, this is what's going on. So I'd like to close that gap. And for the sake of my prefrontal cortex working at full capacity, I like to remember that little part of our, physical part. And then, of course, like you mentioned, we have frequency, and so our consciousness. And I like to use David Hawkins' levels of consciousness for reference. And so when we think about fear being at like 100 frequency and love at 500, that also helps me keep an idea of the range there. And so we can tune into the higher frequencies. And there is so much frenetic energy, chaotic energy. It feels real scurried. That's the word that keeps coming to me, scurried energy. So even if highly, intuitive, sensitive people are feeling it, but even everybody is feeling it. They may not be able to pinpoint, but it is being felt. And so it's really our opportunity. I strongly feel there's an opportunity right now to slow down and go inward. Just go deeply inward, because there's so much of that. I think and it's compounded because this is not just like our country. This is global right now. So it's a time to be inspired and inspired. This is what I've been thinking. I love inspiration. And one of the best definitions I ever read of the word inspire is to take an in-breath of the spirit. I just feel like right now that is the time for us, is this gift, this opportunity to slow down, to take an in-breath of the spirit. And we were talking a little bit earlier about going back to the basics, just strengthening your foundations for your spiritual practice, your spiritual life, the way that you stay grounded and centered and focused in. And so I think this is an invitation for us, especially those of us who have this, shelter in place in order, and we're home, we're slower. This is an opportunity, a real opportunity to just go back to the basics. What do I want? What am I about? Is this the time to start nourishing myself with healthy food? Is this time for more body movement? What is it? What is it that is really nourishing right now? And yeah, so personally, I'm a big fan of like morning routines, evening routines, meditation, those types of things. I was sharing over the weekend with my community a story that I was remembering this last week. It's called Into the Magic Shop. And he went back to the basics with some of his little magic tricks that he was sharing with us. And have either of you read the book? No. Yeah. Okay, so he starts out, he's a neurosurgeon, and why I started thinking about him in that book was because I was thinking about what the brain is doing when we start to feel that frenetic fear, that place of fear. And he was talking about he was getting ready to do surgery, brain surgery on a little boy and remove a tumor. And in this surgery room, I'm going to make this longer story short as I can. He something goes wrong in the surgery. He's really focused, but the assistant kind of nicks the blood vessel and it just starts pouring blood, and he can't see the blood vessel to clamp it in order to stop the blood flow. And so he says in that moment, I just went back to the magic shop where I learned some practices when he was a kid, and he loved magic when he was a kid, and he ended up spending the summer with a lady who said, I will teach you some real magic. And she taught him 4 tricks, and I taught them down so I won't forget them. So the first trick was to relax your body, and she taught him, just to really to learn how to go to that place. And she taught him by taking 3 inward breaths and then holding it out, and we all have different ways we do that, but basically breathing, relax the body, really learn to relax the body. Start with your toes, let them melt away, then move to your feet, let them melt away, move up your body to your chest, your spine, your neck, your face, your scalp, let it melt away, and practice every day. And he was a kid in a really dysfunctional home, a lot of unrest going on, so he said, I got a lot of practice with relaxing my body. So trick number 2 was to tame the mind. And so she had asked him, what who are the voices that you hear in your head? We have all this chatter in our head. What is that? And he said, well, it kind of sounds like a DJ that on the radio that never stops talking. And she said, well, ask yourself, who is that? Who is that talking? And what are all those voices saying to you? And are they is that something you really believe? Is that something somebody told you? And she got him to really start thinking about all those programs and all those voices in the head. And, are they saying fearful things? Are they getting you in a panic mode, or is it calming? So she taught him to tame the mind by staring at a flame on a candle and really focusing into that flame. And so this is another thing, like back to the basics, staring at the flame, using a mantra. She told them, you pick any word you want, and then just focus on, elongating the sounds, just feeling into this vibration of the sounds, not necessarily the word. It didn't matter what word. And what was the other thing she told them? Mantra and breath work. And so, we worked a lot with breath work too. So back to the basics. So trick number 3, she told them, was open your heart up. And so we were talking earlier that a lot of times when we feel fear, we hold it in our chest area, we hold it in our heart and our chest area. And so thinking about the lungs, we want to keep our lungs wide open. And this is also an image of just opening our arms wide to embrace what's going on, embrace the unknown with arms wide open. This is just like, come what may. It might not look like we think it's going to look, and still arms wide open. So she was talking to him about a practice of, and to me, I think this feels like a compassion practice that I have used, but she said, think about people. First, imagine someone you love and send them love. And now imagine somebody maybe that you don't love, you don't feel like you love so much, that might mistreat you, or you feel, you don't like the way they act or the things that you practice love. I do a practice, I've done a practice for years called Just Like Me. And it's like looking for the commonalities. Even if somebody's starting to kind of push your buttons, or things in the world are pushing your buttons, people doing things that you might not agree with. Just like me, that person needs love and shelter and food and nourishment. Just like me, they've experienced despair or sadness. Just kind of going to that, just like me. We're the same. We're one. And so she had him do this practice of really, and also sitting with pain. She was talking about feeling pain. So what happened that particular day, she was teaching him about opening his heart. He walked into the magic shop and he heard a conversation with the woman, Ruth, that he was working with, and her son. And he immediately thought it was about him, and that the son was saying that he didn't like the boy. And later on, he asked Ruth about it, and said, why doesn't your son Neil like me? I heard your conversation earlier. And she said, oh, wow, we weren't even talking about you. We were talking about somebody else. And so look how quickly you took that to think about something's wrong with you. And so that's the first piece of pain we can look at and hold up and feel around. And he said every time he brought up another piece of pain, he was worried about his family getting evicted. His father didn't work. His father was an alcoholic and was raging. So there's all of these things that he could bring up that was felt pain in his heart. And she said, open your heart to it and just sit with it. And he said, and each time he did it, it just felt less and less and less. And so this is this child learning these tricks, these real magic tricks. And so that was number 3. And the 4th trick she taught him was clarifying intent. And that one, she said, first, you must open your heart. So trick number 3 has to come before trick number 4. And clarifying intent is really about creation. And TJ, you kind of touched on this, like we're collectively creating. So we can wake up every morning and decide how we want the world to look and how we want to show up in the world. And so she was asking him at the time that he was a boy, what do you want to create? He says, I really want to be a doctor. I saw a doctor speak at my school. He was like 4th grade, and I want to be a doctor like him. And so she told him, pretend every day that you're looking out a foggy window, and then every day the defroster comes on and it gets clearer and clearer, and you're seeing that view. And she said, and the trick is that you really have to not just see it out the window, you have to feel it. Feel into the emotion you feel as a doctor and everything, like be that already, like as if already. And so so that's, I think, our call right now. She's like, as if there's no panic or anything going on, as if we are this holding the high watch of our love, our loving intention for the planet. So she was teaching them that. And so what she was doing, from that brain perspective, he learned later in medical school, she was, sort of forming new neurocircuits, right? Because she's shifting the way he's kind of programmed to think and go to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so these are practices. And so what he did was then he said, I'm in this surgery room with this little boy who now is bleeding to death on my table under me. I'm the surgeon. And everybody is like panic and fear. The anesthesiologist is trying to keep him alive. And he said, so I did what I was taught when I was a young boy in the magic shop. And I relaxed my body. And I calmed my mind. And I opened my heart. And in my mind's eye, I saw that retracted vessel, because the vessel, once it was nicked, it just retracted in, and there's all this blood. This assistant was shaking so bad he couldn't even suction the blood out. And so I just saw it in my mind's eye, and I reached in with my clamp, my clip, and I stopped the blood from just gushing out. And so I just thought it was just such a touching example, illustration of just using your practices, especially in times of when it feels scary and frenetic and scurried, and who's describing the nurse and everybody in the room just really stressed out, and just being able to hold that space and going back to the basics, the basics.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I really love that too, because, and I don't know, Jeremy, if you heard it, but she's going through the 4 rooms, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's so, like in conscious recovery, we talk about the Indian proverb with the 4 rooms. I've been big on acronyms. I'll give 2 now. One is PIES: physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. That's kind of the foundation of what we talk about in conscious recovery. And that's exactly what those 4 tricks are: calming down physically. And I personally think it's really important that we do it in that order. First, I calm the body, as you said, Amy. That's beautiful. And then notice the thoughts, question the thoughts, allow those thoughts to come and go, recognize that I'm not my thoughts, right? So that would be that candle. And then the emotional piece is opening my heart to all of it, what I consider joy, what I consider sorrow. Because if there's ever been a time in the world where it's important, I know I'll speak for myself, for me to allow myself to feel whatever is emerging without judgment, or notice the judgment, go back to the heart. And then that last place, that last room, is that spiritual or that essential self. So that's the physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual. So of course I love the synchronicity of that.
Yeah, I do too. I thought the same thing when I had originally read them. Oh, these are just these universal truths. This connects. It's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually a beautiful segue to kind of the first topic I wanted to jump in on with you both. And that is that we are in this time right now that is fearful and anxious and scattered. And I think, like Amy touched on, one of the really beautiful things to emerge from that is this drive to improve ourselves. I feel like, it's what I've seen on the internet over the last 2 weeks, is a lot of people sharing what they're doing to take advantage of the extra time that they have and the emotional inspiration they have to acknowledge what really matters. And so what we've seen is this saturation on the internet of spirituality, and how can we remain connected, and how can we deepen our practice. And I thought maybe we could rewind a little bit and get from each of you kind of what your take is on what a spiritual practice really is. So TJ, why don't we start with you, and let's see what you have.
Yeah, I've been all about acronyms lately, and this one is going to be a little bit odd. I'm just going to say right out of the gate. And I wake up with these, or they come in meditation. And so I was sitting with what I do in a session with someone, right? A spiritual counseling session, a session with someone that is coming out of an addiction. And I thought, I'm here to be a cop. Now, that's going to sound really strange, right? Because I'm like the last person that would ever be a cop. I'm sure I would last about 2 hours, and they would tell me, thank you for your time. But what COP stands for is curiosity, openness, and presence, right? And there's never been a time in my life, well, let me rephrase this. Like every other moment in my life, that's what I am intending to do and be in the world right now. Can I become curious rather than go into judgment, right? We talked about this a lot with our show on Tuesday with Adriana Popescu. So if you're watching right now, that's another great one to watch, because we talked a lot about the power of perspective, right? And when I simply shift from, I have an idea about this, which, by the way, Amy spoke to, right? That part of my brain that goes into survival, I go into judgment too. Normalizing that, shifting into curiosity. So even asking something so simple like, can I be curious about this? Right? I notice that there are these different camps right now, and that's always true. There are different camps, and I noticed myself being pulled toward one of them. And then I said, let me be curious about this, right? Amy spoke of compassion. That's as I, the way she said it, I also say, isn't it interesting I'm doing that right now when I have a judgment about another? Because we're all one. So if I have a judgment, can I shift to curiosity? And then openness. Can I be open to what's actually happening? Can I be open to what's happening in all those rooms physically? Can I check in with my body? It's really easy, as Amy said, to get tight right now. Notice that and become conscious, become open. Through openness, I can start to make a choice, because that's really fundamental. We're always choosing. We're either choosing unconsciously or consciously. So if I'm in judgment and restriction, when I become curious, I open. And then when I stay open and present, I can be present with what is. And it starts with, for me, it starts with being present what's happening internally in those 4 rooms: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And when I can become really present with myself, I don't go into a strategy. Jeremy, in Conscious Recovery, we talk a lot about strategies, right? I have a core belief: the world is not safe. Then I have a strategy to manage that. Rather than focusing on our strategies right now are opinionating, posting on Facebook, judging, creating new hashtags, stay the F home. Okay, interesting, right? There you go. So a lot of us, myself included, will tend to, maybe even our first reaction will be external, right? Let me tell people what they should be doing, or let me try to create safety externally. When we become a cop, curious, open, and present, we can start to shift from the strategies maybe that we've been using for years, or maybe even lifetimes, or as my friend Michael Beckwith says, life chapters. We don't have past lives, only past chapters. I love that. One life. When I become curious, open, and present, I can start to shift out of all the strategies and into a recognition of what's happening. One of my favorite quotes is from Eckhart Tolle. He says, when we recognize illusion as illusion, it begins to dissolve. Right. So the illusion right now, again, as Amy said, is that I know what's going to happen. That's an illusion. We don't know what's going to happen, right? The illusion that if I create my life in a certain way, I will be safe. That's an illusion. True safety is internal. When I know deeply who and what I am, and when I'm connected or recognize my oneness with that, everything else changes, because then I'm not being battered around by the conditions of the world. In other words, I can be in the world, but not of it, as a wise teacher once said.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Amy, what do you think? What is spirituality to you? What does it mean?
Well, I love everything TJ said. I love the rooms and your acronyms. I'm gonna have to start making some of my own. Love that. What is spirituality to me? It's not really a separate thing for me. It's just how I live. And I started years ago with a little thing called what I called notice, recognize, release. So it's not as cute as, the acronym, but so the notice really is about the pause. And I love the pause because it just gives you a moment to check in and notice what's going on. So I've just got into a practice with how I like to live. I know where I like my vibration. I know where I feel aligned. And if I feel off with that, with a judgment, with a fear, or whatever it might be that I got into, I feel that. I'm just, I feel that. So then I just notice that. Notice in that moment, pause, what's going on. Just that an awareness, that first step of awareness, and then recognize, TJ, you said something about like this, but recognize where does that come from? What is that about? Is that my thought? Is that just a thought I'm observing? Because I can put that back on the conveyor belt. I always have this image of there's a conveyor belt of thoughts going by, and if I had pulled one down, I could put it back up and pull another one. Just let the conveyor belt go by of thoughts. And so just recognize what's where it's coming from, maybe, and that is always about opening up, right? Opening up and really doing an inventory, kind of checking in, and then and recognize. What I love about the word recognize is recognize, right? So cognize is to become conscious of, and when you look at the word it's to take back to original, right? So I loved that. One time I did this reboot thing, and I love it because it's like rebooting, rebooting your computer when you need to just kind of like clear things out. And I feel like we're in a reboot right now. You get this really great gift, this invitation to reboot, just to restore, to recognize, and get centered about, where we're going at. I really feel that we're to come out on the other end, not depleted, not exhausted, but energized. And so the last part of my notice, recognize, release is then decide, is this something to let go of? Is this something no longer serving me? Have I bought into a fear? Have I bought into a judgment? Whatever, comes up as human beings. And I can let it go. I can make that decision. I can make that choice. So that's kind of my thought on that about living. And I love practical tools. And so for me, I use a lot of little, I guess you call them affirmations for years, so if something starts to feel, if I start to feel anxiety come up about something, I just go right back to center and start saying, life works out for me. Everything works out. I'm safe, secure, and blessed. Like I have a bunch of these that they're my go-tos. I just pull them. And if I need them in the moment, that's what I remind myself, reminders to stay centered and know the truth is within. And right now, there's so many questions. I think people are like, what's going on? And questions out there. And guess where all our answers are? Within. That's where we hear our guidance when we go take that in-breath of spirit. And so we have this gift that we have this time right now, this slowing down time where it's just like, it's your time to evolve, to grow, to become aware, to awaken, however you want to call that, and tune in with God, with source, with spirit, with whatever that is that you tune into.
Yeah. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think, knowing now what spirituality can look like and what it means to you both, I think the other piece that people are really trying to, or really gravitating towards right now is, how can I use this time to really connect with myself and the people I love on a spiritual level? So I know for me, when I started my path of recovery and personal development and spirituality, a lot of the concepts were almost so simple that it made them abstract, where it was like, I would hear people talk about spirituality and I'm like, man, that sounds pretty good, but like, what do? You just sit there, or, and it was so almost elusive. And so what I'm hoping to hear from each of you is, in this time of fear, in this time of anxiety, and also this time of opportunity, what can the work look like for people who are looking to do it? TJ, you want to start us up?
Yeah, I think one of the things you spoke to that I think is important, and maybe it's because I'm like 82% extroverted. I do love all the extroverted, introverted memes that are going around, because humor is important, right? And so for some of us, and this may not be true for everyone, but it's something that I reflected on this morning in my meditation, and that is, I like to ask myself questions, right? So who do I want to connect with today? And I sat with that, and like 3 names came up. So after this, I'm going to text my 3 friends that came up and say, hey, Uh, can we have a phone call today? Can we have a FaceTime or a Zoom call? Because I know for myself that when I look at my schedule in the past, in the very recent past, it was really full, right? I'm very passionate about my work. I'm going all the time. And I love that. I love that. And right now, as Amy said, and you, Jeremy, this is the time to move within. Part of that moving within to me is to ask myself the question, who do I want to connect with today? Because I also had something that I posted today, and it was just something that came in my meditation. Am I in the sanity, or am I in the sanity? Am I in the sanity or in the insanity? You know what I'm trying to say. Am I in the sanity or am I in the insanity, right? Where do I want to put my focus? So what is sanity? We live in a world that has accepted a lot of things that we call sanity. And I write about this in my first book, Conscious Being. Take the United States, for example. If the United States were a human being, we would give them mental illness diagnoses and treat them. Narcissistic personality disorder, right? There are things that we accept in the collectively and we have called sanity. War is the way of our world. Competition, sports figures making millions and millions of dollars, us and them, good and bad, right and wrong, two political parties, religion that says people are inherently wrong. This is insanity. And I'm speaking to this really clearly and powerfully right now because it's important. We have collectively been taught lies about the fundamental truth of who and what we are. That we are broken, that we are damaged, that we have defects, that we're not whole and perfect spiritual beings, that we must compete in order to survive. We are afraid to actually face the reality that death is a part of life on our planet. There are cultures like the Indian culture where they celebrate death. They burn the bodies, they watch the bodies burn, they mourn, they say this is part of life. Whereas in American culture, we make the body look really beautiful. We say things like, oh, she's in a better place, and isn't she beautiful? We also say, and I talk about this a lot, but it's one that I love to talk about. We literally send someone out off this planet in their death with this language. She lost her 3-year battle with cancer. Right? So we're swimming in the consciousness of insanity, of separation, of fear, of pushing against, of competition, of fighting, to the degree where we don't even recognize that we're doing it. Why is this important? That is what we have decided is sanity, and that's actually insanity. We're fighting what is a part of life. We're born, we grow up, and we leave this planet. Now, that might change at some point. I recognize that there might be a different level of consciousness at some point, but for right now, that's part of life. When I really made peace with my own death, it's going to happen at some point, I had a profoundly different way of living life. I heard a talk once from a person who worked in hospice care, and she called it What Death Teaches Us About Life. So if we recognize the paradigm of, oh my God, this is all so horrible that this is happening, we must fight it. On one level of consciousness, I understand that. I'm not saying we don't want to look at what's happening in the world and have medical advances, but what's getting created by this paradigm of against, fight, terrible, this is horrible, that energy has been accepted as sanity. And it's actually insanity. Sanity is a deep recognition of who and what we are as infinite spiritual beings. Again, Michael Beckwith, we talk about spiritual beings having a human experience. He says we're spiritual beings having a human incarnation. We incarnate as spiritual beings. And when I really know that, when I know I'm an infinite spiritual being, everything changes because I don't have to be as afraid anymore because I recognize it's part of life anyway. And so being in the flow of life, it doesn't mean I'm going to let the river take me wherever it wants to. I can steer gently in the river, but many of us have been taught that the way to do it is to try to swim upstream and fight the current. And the fundamental question, and I'm going to close this little part with this, the fundamental question is, how is that working for us? It becomes profoundly practical. And that's what, Jeremy, I really appreciate that you said these concepts are so simple. Sometimes I think the spiritual concepts are almost too simple for our complex minds, or what we've decided are our complex minds. The simplicity of it is we're whole and perfect spiritual beings. We came into this world as love and light. It's still who we are. Spirituality is about a returning to that. I love that Amy talked about recognizing, returning to the essential truth. Jeremy, we talk about recovery. It's recovering that essential truth. That is a totally different way of walking through anything happening, including what we're seeing right now in our world.
Absolutely, TJ. And I think there's so many layers to that we can explore. And I want to throw it to Amy really quick, because Amy, you and I had talked before the show, and I know you're really into practical tools and tips and things like that. So for people that are watching or listening that are new to spiritual practice, or feeling a little disconnected or rattled because of everything going on externally right now, what are some things that people can do to restore balance and, as you said earlier, reconnect with what they already have inside?
Yeah, I think paying attention, really start paying attention to yourself and what works for you. You know, a lot of times we're going through the motions in life and things get going fast, and we all get on that fast train sometimes, and we're not stopping to check in, like, just back to the basics. Is what I'm eating working for me? Am I getting enough sleep? Do I need more sleep, or am I somebody that needs less sleep? Basics. When do I like to meditate? I personally like right when I wake up, because I like that alpha state. I just go right into meditation when I wake up, because I know those first 20 minutes are setting up my day. Like I don't go right to my phone, and that took some training to shift away from doing something like that first thing, and just knowing what will create my day, what centers me, what works for me. And I think that the first thing is just really becoming hyper aware of what's going on with you. And when you're off track, you know what I was talking about, knowing when I'm aligned and when I'm off track, and continuing to offer yourself the questions that lead you to staying curious, staying in discovery, because that's really where we are able to stay open to that wide open, embracing the unknown. And something I wanted to go back and touch on, what TJ was talking about, what death was, that was the first thing that I really asked myself about everything that's going on in the world right now. Like, what is the fear, the biggest fear? Well, it's of dying.
Yeah.
And so I got really clear about that. You know what? Am I okay with that? Yeah, I am. I don't feel like it's my time. However, I can be at peace with that, but these are uncomfortable conversations for a lot of people. And so it's just about honoring where you're at, checking in about that, really loving yourself, really taking care to love yourself and give yourself that extra, whatever you need right now. I know people with businesses and things that might be closing down, or even everything, really, not even just businesses, just there's a lot of shifting right now. And so it seems uncertain, and uncertainty can cause stress. And so when we can just say, what I'm certain about is there's something going on here that I can't see yet, but I can tune into that energy and know that it may not look the way I thought it was going to look, but there's something, there's an opportunity. There's always an opportunity here. And coming back to that, I always think myself, I'm a conduit for whatever the spirit is wanting to share. And so if I'm blocking off and constricted, I'm not able to do that. So the more I can just keep opening up, and that looks different for everybody. If you're an extrovert type of a person right now, you might be really so find Zoom calls, create places, right? Find I think I saw you post something, TJ, that it was like a summit. So find some people to come together and be extroverted, you know, online. And so it might look a little different right now, but it's possible. And did we talk about the pivot? I don't know if we did, but
We haven't yet, but I was going to bring it up.
Oh.
So, yep.
Okay, let's segue into that. There's somebody, a business kind of coach that I like and watch, and he's been talking a lot about the pivot lately. And the pivot, when times are changing like this, was what we're doing. But some people are thinking that this is like we're jumping to do a whole different thing. We're just moving from this building to the next building. But really what the pivot is staying grounded with one foot. Like this is an illustration, grounded with one foot, and then the other one's kind of like, well, this week, what are we doing? And for me, that's what I was doing with my spiritual centers. Like, well, when it was first, we couldn't gather together because we couldn't be 6 feet apart. Well, what are we gonna do? Let's go to FaceTime, you know, Facebook Live or Zoom. And so we're pivoting right now and deciding each day, well, now what? And so it's still staying grounded. So we're not getting into the scurried, frenetic energy. It's like we're still grounded. And today we're getting the opportunity to be innovative and come up with something new and creative. And it's actually exciting me because I just see so many things unfolding right now that maybe people wouldn't be doing right otherwise. And so this is opening doors, and I think that back to the basics again, don't necessarily feel like, okay, now all of a sudden I have to create some whole new thing. Go inward. Who are you all about? What are you all about? So the first thing I do is like, I always ask the question, how can I serve love? Every single day. This is the first thing I ask. How can I serve love today? And so that looks different for everybody. So for me, and stay in peace and stay out of the frenetic energy. I don't want to cause more stress or more things on my plate to feed into what's going on. So I just go to the basics of who am I? What's easy for me? Compassion, you know, restoring, rebooting. So I immediately put out, you know, I have some groups if you want to join. That's easy for me. I saw somebody I know and love, she offered a prayer and a weekly chamber of prayer, and I just smiled because like, that's so her. Like that was perfect offering from her heart. So if we just keep going into our heart and saying, how can I serve, and how does that look at ease for me? Because there's a lot of dis-ease in the world right now, right? So we want to be energizing ease. So what's easy for me? And like TJ, you said, connecting, calling a few people I want to connect with, however that looks, but go inward and ask the questions, and then you hear your guidance, and to get really to know yourself a little bit. This is know thyself time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so I think as we move towards closing here with this conversation, you guys, one of the things I really wanted to touch on was the fact that this is a really beautiful opportunity for us as individuals and, more importantly, collectively, to really awaken to our true potential. Amy, as you said when we were texting, we have this potential, not just ourselves, but as a collective. And how do we awaken to that potential amidst a massive crisis like this that is global, and cultivate that sense of connection and awakening to our true potential? TJ, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, what I want to offer two sort of parting opportunities or practices. One is to notice the energy. Science recognizes that life is energy, right? And we once believed that things were solid, and now we know they're not. It's whirling energy, right? What we call it, like a table, is not really solid. So if it's true that life is energy, we come into this world where our little brains aren't even developed, and we feel the energy of our parents, of our caregivers, going to school, absorbing all that energy. So if it's true that life is energy and that most of our communication actually is energy, my invitation for anyone watching is to check in with the energy of all the situations and within yourself. In other words, it's interesting because TV has a frequency, right? So if I turn on CNN, it has a frequency, right? And if I can move completely out of good, bad, right, wrong and say, how does this make me feel? Or I could turn to the Real Housewives, right? Now, there's a frequency. I think it's interesting that that's become entertainment in our culture. I'm on that, little kick right now of like, what is sanity? I'm going to leave you in a moment with some questions. But what's the frequency of that? Not from judgment, but from how do I feel when I watch that? How do I feel when I watch this? How do I feel when I call a family member that maybe I haven't connected with? How do I feel when I ask myself, how can I serve today? Who might be in pain right now? Do you know someone that lives alone? Maybe you live alone. Maybe you like living alone. Maybe this is like, ooh, finally, I get to chill out. Asking ourselves, how do I feel and what energy am I experiencing when I'm doing these different activities? It's a misnomer right now that we're not allowed to go outside. If you read the guidelines, it's saying, please go outside, get your exercise, stay 6 feet apart from each other, wash your hands for 20 seconds. But people are saying we're locked in our houses. It's not what people are saying. Now, it might get to that. I hope not. But right now, we're encouraged to go outside. How does it feel walking on a trail alone? How does it feel being in the world, but not of the world? In other words, check in with the energy. Can we move beyond judgment and say, how does it feel when I do this? How does it feel when I meditate? How does it feel when I watch this, etc.? That's one thing. The second piece is I want to leave you with 3 questions. I don't know what they are yet. That's how I roll. One question is, what is wanting to emerge in my life and on the planet right now? Now, when I ask a question, I don't mean answer that question. You might write that on your mirror. You might take that into your meditation. What is wanting to emerge in my life and in the world? What is wanting to emerge right now? Just be with that question. The second question that shows up for me is, how can I serve in this moment? How can I serve rather than how can I judge? There's a story I think I tell in both my books about my first teacher, Mary Helen Brownell. And I'm going to just tell the story because why not? I was with her in the airport in Los Angeles. This was 1992 or 3. We were on our way to India, and long story short is we had a 24-hour delay. We stayed in the airport. There was a scene that unfolded where a young mother had an infant that was crying and crying and crying in the crowd. I could talk about the energy, I could feel it. And the young woman started yelling at this baby, like full on abusively yelling, and people were horrified, and I could feel the judgment, and people were just like, saying things to her. And Mary Helen, my mentor, my spiritual teacher, she stood up without saying a word, walked over to the mother, and I heard her say, I was a young mother too. How can I help you right now? Now, it would be really easy to go into judgment. That's honestly what most of us in the room did. And we can justify that, right? We can go into like how horrible she's abusing her baby. Yeah. But Mary Helen chose something different, and that is, how can I serve you right now? And I remember just breaking down into tears. It's still really emotional for me because she held the baby and she put her arm around the young mother. She offered, how can I love you right now? How can I serve you? Right. So we're in the midst of all sorts of things happening, and we have an opportunity here to be of service. Maybe those are the only 2 questions. After that one, I don't know if I have another one. So what's wanting to emerge in my life and in the world, and how can I serve, or how can I be love in the world?
Beautiful. Thanks, TJ. Amy, what do you think?
I think that's perfect. And I will just add to remind ourselves that we don't have this position of helplessness or passive observer. Yeah. That we are really active, that we can be this participant, right? This really powerful participant in collectively what we're creating right now. And that's what I'll end with.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both so much. I mean, were there any other final thoughts you guys wanted to throw out there before we wrap or end on that?
I just want to say thank you. You know, I love gratitude as a practice, as a way of being. And I love that the three of us are together because you're both really important people in my life that have never met. And so, you know, I know one day we'll all be in person together whenever they allow that. And right now it's just really wonderful to connect, both of you and with both of you. And of course, all of our viewers, just thank you so much for, you know, being conscious right now in a time where it's really easy to go unconscious. So thank you for your willingness to be with us in this conversation, and a huge thank you to Amy and to Jeremy for really all that you be.
Thank you. So exciting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Amy, for our audience, where can they find you if they want more from you?
Okay, yeah. So my website is linge.com, and I'm on social media, Instagram and Facebook. My name. So
Cool. All right, awesome. I'll make sure to plug links so that if people are interested, they can find you there. And TJ, obviously, we can find you at tjwoodward.com and consciousrecovery.com. Any other plugs you want to add there at the end?
Well, I want to say, you know, we now have the Conscious Recovery Experience, and it's really interesting timing. Jeremy and I've been in the studio for a year, a Wholehearted studio, creating multiple products. And the first one just launched, and it's the Conscious Recovery Experience, which is a fully immersive, interactive process that will allow you to walk through the entire process that is conscious recovery, right? And that's through video, through exercises that you do, and it's $199 a year. We got really clear at Wholehearted, Jeremy and I talked, AJ, the owner of Wholehearted, that because of what's happening in the world, we want to offer it at 75% off. So when you sign up between now and March 31st, and we might look at that date, but right now through March 31st, you can get it for $49. So go to wholehearted.org for that. That's really something that when I ask the question, how can I serve? I'm really grateful in a strange way for the timing, because this is something that people do at home individually rather than in person. So wholehearted.org for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. And Amy, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your words so much. And I love my role because I just get to sit back and learn from you both. And it's like the easiest thing in the world. So I'm also really, really full of gratitude for you both. And I'm super excited to work more together in the future. So thank you both again. And for all the people listening and watching, we're going to have these shows regularly online. So make sure you check out Conscious Recovery on Facebook and Instagram so you can see all the events coming up.
yay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.